obsession with the true identity of Solaire has plagued the Dark Souls community since the game's release, but we believe we've got it backwards. Solaire hasn't got a secret identity. Solaire is the secret identity of someone else. No, not the firstborn son, or Velka, or anything like that. In fact, most lore conspiracy theories might be disappointed that he isn't the Nameless King, or a Black Knight, as entertaining as that would be. To get to who, and more broadly, what Solaire represents, we have to go far deeper into his character than simple item descriptions and actions. We have to pass through them in order to feel his desires and emotions. We need to try and understand him. It is well known that Solaire is an undead warrior from Astora, and a member of the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant. It is well known that he helps us with summoning mechanics, and also with several boss battles if we choose to invite him. In many ways, he is like us, undead, alone, and on a quest. He himself is on quite a different quest from ours, however. It is still full of bonfires and enemies and exploration, but it is qualitatively quite a different thing to ours. His quest is his own. He is making his own course and is questing for what he calls his very own sun. We don't know what this means, of course, as to us, a sun is a star of burning gas that seems to defy the concept of possession. But maybe Solaire means something else. Maybe he doesn't mean a literal sun. Or maybe the sun he means is literal to him, but for us, those who do not live in the Dark Souls universe, we do not understand him. We meet Solaire in front of the Hellkite Drake, an enemy he doesn't warn us about. He may be yet unaware of the huge drake that guards the bridge, and can't tear his eyes away from the magnificence of the sun. But his help extends only to the gift of a white sign soapstone. If only he had mentioned the possibility of our imminent doom. He himself must succeed in traversing this perilous bridge, in passing the statue with a baby that holds a similar straight sword to his own, and making it to the depths, facing the gaping dragon. He continues to make it all the way to Anolondo, alone. Further than Black Iron Tarkus, and the Great Logan. We don't need his equipment description to tell us he's impressive. He proves it. Solaire's quest continues until it splits into various endings. One potential ending, the rarer one, is that he joins us in our fight against Gwyn in the Kiln of the First Flame. Solaire is alive and well, and joins in one last jolly cooperation. This shows he has so far been unsuccessful in his quest, but hasn't given in to despair just yet. A different ending, and the ending most people have seen for Solaire, is at the end of a tunnel in Lost Izalith. He has a sunlight maggot latched onto his head, and though he is said by many to be hollow, we aren't sure if he is. He is still human under his helmet, but of course this isn't proof, as several NPCs have undamaged faces despite item descriptions that give details to the contrary. We feel that if his obsession has reached a peak, then it is possible that he is simply overprotective of his newfound son, desperate and mad, but not hollow in the traditional sense. Perhaps this very obsession means he is not hollow, with hollows in general not communicating and having little interest in the world around them. He will attack us until he kills us, or we kill him. And there is no further progression to this story. Such is the Solaire story as we know it. Let us look to see what is under the surface of his quest, and what is meant by him, his items, his creation, his nature. Solaire doesn't seem to be a young man. He is still capable of fighting, but he isn't slim. His belly hangs out in front. His whole shape is the design of a typical middle-aged man. In addition to that, he has plenty of evidence of time-consuming training. He uses Great Heal, a miracle that in its description is cast by advanced clerics. He is also highly knowledgeable, giving us advice on extremely complicated mechanics about world timelines, which no one yet understands. Perhaps, even at From Software, only Miyazaki himself does. So, he is not a young man. He has had time to be inspired by another son, and understand some of the history of the land of Lordran. He is also a fairly advanced member of a covenant, shows significant battle prowess, and knows how to take care of his weapons. He has the sense of experience everywhere. It is also likely that he is not mad when he talks about his own son. Remember, this is not our world. There is no sun before the first flame. The first flame appeared deep in the earth. Therefore, the sun is not a star or a ball of gas, but something else entirely. It may have been made by Gwyn with the first flame or Lord Souls. Therefore, it is reasonable to believe that it would be possible to create another sun, just like Izalith creates another flame. Indeed, not all locations have a sun, and the proof of the sun being connected to the dynamics of the Dark Souls universe is that it turns black during the Age of Dark. This is not a sun which has the same rules of our world, it simply has the same name. Solaire is perfectly sane, we just don't understand how the sun of Dark Souls works. The later FromSoft games continue to push how different the sun of these worlds are to our own. In terms of his character, he is more than just jolly. He is extremely diligent and hardworking. His jolliness is likely a mindset to face the hardships he goes through on a regular basis. He doesn't let things get to him. He stays positive and optimistic even in the face of great challenges. He is aiming for something enormous and hasn't achieved it yet, but has a lot of merit and ability. He has traversed a great distance and surmounted great challenges to even arrive at Lordran. And all that is before all he must face within Lordran to even have a chance at succeeding. Before coming to Lordran, he became undead.
But I cannot give up. I became undead to pursue this.
We know, of course, that all his effort up to this point, and all the challenges, boss fights, depths crawling, building climbing, and lava walking that is to follow, leads him to nothing. But who is he? Why put him in the game at all? He doesn't link in with other characters like the Onion Knights. Even Lautrec can be summoned for a couple of Solaire's boss fights. It would have been easy to replace Solaire in other boss fights too. He is a lone adventurer who could be removed from the game quite easily and replaced with a White Sign Soapstone at the same location. So what is it about him that made Miyazaki bother putting him in the game in the first place? We believe Solaire is the Dark Souls representation of Hidetaka Miyazaki himself. Now, we know Miyazaki doesn't go around painting suns on his shirt and praising the sun, apart from that one time. But we think they have a lot in common, and Solaire embodies a lot of the emotions, characteristics, history, and choices of Miyazaki, and that Solaire's fate could have been Miyazaki's future at certain points of his life. Since we've looked at Solaire's history, let's look at Hidetaka Miyazaki's past. Miyazaki grew up on a diet of fantasy books, or at least that is the story told by a company selling fantasy games. We've all heard the story about how Miyazaki had to fill in the blanks in Western fantasy stories. We've all heard about his inspiration from other games, how he had a boring office job, how he quit his office job after being inspired by a video game that put him in awe, Ico, and within a decade, by some accounts within 6 years at From Software, he was releasing the company's top titles. This sort of stuff is all lovely, but probably about as reliable as a story told by Lord Trek. It's marketing, and probably isn't even put out by Miyazaki himself, but by From Software and Bandai Namco. What we do know is Miyazaki studied social sciences at university, likely worked at Oracle before From Software, and then, once employed at FromSoft, moved very quickly up the ranks. Supposedly, there was then a project called Demon Souls, which had lost its way, and he asked to lead it. How on earth this was achieved in a Japanese company is tough to imagine, but it's a fact that he did direct Demon Souls. We will get to our theorizing in a moment. What we know for sure is that if you work at an Oracle programming job, you won't be given much time to research great spears and halberds, or read Berserk, or learn about game design, or any of the myriad things Miyazaki shows great ability in throughout his game direction. The only time he would have spare was his free time after work, and to have this much talent and artistic insight would take years and years of free time. So, we can assume he had his sights on game design and creation well before. Indeed, it's not mentioned in his origin story as often, but he did consider applying to a game design company straight out of university. Hardly the move of someone who never considered being creative until shortly before his 30th birthday. What is much more likely is that he took the Oracle job as a compromise, like most great artists who need money to eat until their creations can come to fruition. More impressive than suddenly being inspired and obsessed is that he was well aware of what he wanted to do, and took the conscious risk of leaving a relatively established career to attempt another. He risked financial comfort. He risked a heavy possibility of not being able to work creatively within a game company. After all, why would you give creative license to a career programmer? And he risked all the social pitfalls that come with less career success. It is sure that Miyazaki would have had social respect for his job at Oracle, but being nearly 30 and having worked his way up and then going to work for a video game company for a much lower salary? Not so much. These are the bare bones of his story. What we feel is that Hidetaka Miyazaki isn't just some starry-eyed creative, inspired by a single moment, who, with a bit of luck and a good attitude, got to be the creative director of From Software's most successful games. Look at Dark Souls. Look at its philosophy. It trains ruthless maturity, discipline, exploration, hard work. It is ruthless, like life, like a cog in the Oracle office job machine, like the risks of changing careers, like the risk of putting out creative ideas. We believe Miyazaki is an extremely disciplined individual, And his hard work and passion was apparent to his co-workers as soon as he joined the company.
What year did you meet Miyazaki-san, and what were your first impressions of him?
So Miyazaki-san joined From Software when the industry was dominated by PlayStation 2. And the game he was working on was Armored Core Last Raven. And it was pretty obvious that he had a strong motivation for working on the game. He suggested a lot of things to other dev members, and he also worked really hard convincing other dev team members to align with his direction. So it was pretty obvious that he was standing out from other dev members at From Software.
He handles his team, as shown in DesignWorks interviews, with balance, clarity, and thoughtfulness, yet is ruthless when it comes to quality control. Dark Souls is extremely polished. We believe Miyazaki has been interested in fantasy and video games since early childhood, and much more than that, harboured a desire to create much longer than his origin story claims. He will have taken notes, thought about deep principles, honed his stance on the medium and his creativity for years. One doesn't make a game like Dark Souls by accident. Miyazaki is someone who has learnt some hard lessons, has taken risks quite late in life when it starts to get a bit harder to lose weight and the reality of time starts to show itself. He had done nothing up to this point, but he decided to pursue a plan that he made in his own mind. A quest, if you will. After what we believe to be a re-inspiration for the field of video games in the form of Ico, he took the risk of leaving his comfortable life to try make his own magnificent creation. And after a handful of years, perhaps 6 to 8, of total mystery within From Software, came the release of Demon Souls. Demon Souls even today gets barely any views on its lore. It is much less famous than Dark Souls or other Souls games. At the time of its release, Demon Souls' first week sales were approximately 2% the number of Dark Souls 3's first week sales. In terms of the budget, it was at first projected to be a loss, meaning a massive failure for Miyazaki. Regardless of artistic merit, even those who appreciate it have to accept that the work of art failing commercially doesn't bode well for an artist's future career. Now, let's compare Solaire and Miyazaki again. Both are no longer young men at the point of starting their quest. Both are alone and independent. Both are not magic and have no special skills. They use tools that anyone else could, but are diligent, hard-working, and try to remain stoic, likeable, and jolly. Both are ambitious. One wants to find his very own son, admiring a great predecessor's son and wanting to have his own. The other is inspired by majestic works ranging from Ico to Western mythology to Final Fantasy. Great games that have influenced generations. He doesn't just want to be involved in video game design, he wants to author a great piece of art. He wants to pour his creativity, insight, understanding, and emotions into this work. Solaire must travel through a brutal yet fair, complicated and indeed obliquely political world, with powers at play beyond any individual's understanding. Honing his craft and trying his best. Choosing between risking everything for a possible prize, or giving up and going hollow. Miyazaki is attempting to create a medieval fantasy world that reflects the realities of life, the smallness of the individual against the politics of a company, or the tides of human behaviour. To hone his craft to make something people will view as art, to make enough to live, to perhaps have a future, a family. Both take a great and irreversible risk to achieve their dreams. Solaire chooses to become undead, and Miyazaki quits his job, both forsaking a previously normal life. Both risk seeing their dream and effort and discipline be for nothing. Failing because it was too hard. Failing because you got what you were looking for, but nobody cared. Both not only risk, but experience every day the social and mental costs of a far-off goal you have sacrificed so much for. Miyazaki's friends and family will have wondered why he threw his future away, why he programs for a games company for so much less than Oracle, and how video games, these silly things with a joystick and bright lights, are worth risking his financial security, his friends, and his relationships. Both Solaire and Miyazaki have to contend with the reality of what people think and want from them.
But I cannot give up. I became undead to pursue this. But when I peer at the sun up above, it occurs to me, what if I am seen as a laughingstock, as a blind fool without reason?
As this quest goes on, something begins to happen. Miyazaki gets tired. He begins to doubt. The task is bigger than he imagined. He gets older. He begins to lose hope. What happens to Solaire? His resources run out. He has to maintain his weapons as best he can, and they are maintained well, but they aren't new. Doubts start to plague him. He has a great mindset, but the hardships of time weigh on him.
Was it all a lie? Have I done this all for nothing? Oh, my dear son. What now? What should I do?
Miyazaki got to this point. The failure point of an artist where many finally give up, realize what you're looking for is too hard, or doesn't exist, or never existed. A common realization in the artistic field that is full of fraudulence and audience fickleness. The feeling every true artist has about the value of the field that so inspired them.
Was it all a lie?
The temptation comes to accept defeat, or sink into a kind of madness, a denial and delusion that whispers to the artist that what he does is already of value, that you'll be appreciated later, that it's already beautiful, already perfect and wonderful. You've already achieved it. Your ideas are sufficient as they are. Your work is a marvel, just an unappreciated one. It's your sun. They don't need anyone else to respect it. This is how we find Solaire. Self-deluded, in such a pit of hardship, loneliness, and despair, he accepts a sunlight maggot as his sun. A clear fantasy, much like the great artist that pretends the art is only for himself. But this is the nature of the hole he's dug, a hole very much like Miyazaki had done, in forsaking a career for a job with much less pay and social respect. At a certain point, Solaire simply pretends to himself he has achieved his quest. He's not hollow, he's mad. Miyazaki must have reached this point of doubt and delusion. His delusion wouldn't have been entirely wrong. His very own sun did have value. All his ideas and beliefs about games had value in and of themselves. But it's a very different thing, making a true sun that everyone can appreciate. Miyazaki likely felt the low point when Demon Souls flopped, feeling like his whole world and style he built up over years was disregarded. It meant his very own sun he tried to nurture was worth nothing. A pale comparison to the games of the past. He would never create a sun like his heroes. He thought he had been blinded by a local sun, that only he saw, that was special only for him, and had confused it with a great, huge, universal sun that would warm and inspire many others. He saw this as the end of his dream. No sane company would entrust another game to a director who lost money. Fortunately for everyone, Miyazaki's ending is not quite like Solaire's. Miyazaki learnt something which Solaire hadn't yet, or perhaps couldn't in the Dark Souls world. Neither of them could do it alone. Solaire advises us about jolly cooperation, but perhaps hasn't taken it far enough. It's not jolly, it's essential. Solaire is a solitary adventurer. Standing there watching the sun, we see his true nature. He is a solitary warrior pursuing his quest alone. And he fails. Miyazaki couldn't have created his games alone, and he shows this in Solaire. Solaire's items are well maintained, but it's unlikely he invented the tool of a sword, or a helmet, or a shield. So too must Miyazaki use tools and ideas that existed long before his work. Solaire paints the sun and religious symbols on his equipment, but look at the quality. He is no Da Vinci. Solaire can't do everything. Maintaining his sword and armour, fighting and travelling every day, he's got no room to be good at everything. This is a realization Miyazaki had. He needs his artists, his creators, and his team. Otherwise, he would end up like Solaire, alone and unappreciated. His creations would look like Solaire's shield, functionally sound but laughable to look at. We can see this in Miyazaki's attitude to his team. In every interview, whether for the design works or for accepting awards, he always thanks his team and emphasizes how much they do and how exceptional the quality of their work is. Solaire is the Dark Souls representation of Miyazaki, with all the discipline, experience, and just damn likability that led to his success. Miyazaki even invented the Praise the Sun pose and performed it to his artists. But unlike Solaire, Miyazaki had some realizations about not going it alone, about avoiding the temptations of artistic delusion, about the need for a team. Without these realizations, a sun as great as the Souls series wouldn't have been possible, and Miyazaki might have kept it to himself, a parasite of creativity that ate away at him for the rest of his life, alone in his failure. Instead, Miyazaki created a new sun, which we are all so very lucky to enjoy.